Welcome to Thriving Rockstar with Alex Drake, and today's guest is Brianne Borden. How are you, Brianne?
I'm doing great, considering the current circumstances, as good as I can be doing. How about you?
I'm well. I'm well, thankfully. I happen to be one of those people who works from home anyway. So the only thing that changed is I can't like go certain places around my house. But honestly, recently I just kind of escaped up into the woods like 2 months ago. So my timing couldn't have been better.
Yeah, no kidding.
How's it over there? Are you in Arizona?
It's good. Yeah, I'm in Arizona. I live in Tempe. It's very odd right now because I live in the heart of Tempe, which, if anybody's ever been here, it's a college town and it is dead. It is weirdly dead. Usually I can hear people coming home from the bars at night and it's like 8 o'clock, totally quiet, totally dark. Yeah, so it's kind of a weird vibe, but it's all right. It's okay to slow down every now and then.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. For those of you who are watching like this episode way later, this is coronavirus like time and everything is just like, going crazy. Um, I'd imagine it's not as bad over there because of the heat.
I don't know. It's definitely not as bad as New York, that's for sure. I've got a lot of friends that teach in this city, and I'm hearing all of their craziness going on. But we're pretty darn close to LA, and it's pretty bad over there as well. And definitely, I think Arizona is just taking as many precautions as possible. I've to manage my own stress and anxiety, I've stopped following it super closely. But so I know our number isn't quite as high as a lot of other states, but we're still struggling with containing the spread. So
Yeah, one thing that we failed to contain the spread with is the fear. Um, and that seems to be like rampant. Like I seen an article that just aggravated me yesterday. It was sent to me where just like the virus is airborne, and I was like, Wait, what?" And it was put out by like a major network.
yeah,
And then I read into it, beyond the headline, which a lot of people don't do. Um, I read into it, and then what I see is that it's just like, oh yeah, within hospitals. It's like, oh, how this is so irresponsible, like to be able to, just put out news like that, and to, just
yeah,
like I get it that mainstream news like works off of fear,
yeah,
but like it's enough is enough. It's like people are already just,
yeah.
you know,
It's such a delicate balance of I think it's important that people do their part in staying home and not spreading, but also being able to do that without being totally terrified of like what might happen if you do leave your house. Or I've been going on runs and that's totally by myself, but like
mm-hmm.
I need that for my sanity.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think I know there are a lot of states that are have totally had the stay at home orders and like can't leave for anything at all, even um so my very close friend lives about 2 minutes away. We both are currently living alone, and if I didn't have the ability, we've decided we are going to see the two of each other and we're not going to put anybody else at risk, but we're going to
Right.
hang out with each other. And if I didn't have the ability to do that, I would be going insane.
Yeah, yeah, and I hear that. And honestly, like you're going out and running is it's important for what for your immune system. I mean, you really need to consider that.
Yeah, yeah,
Like people are, and then the balance of fear would, if someone's buying into that fear, it's like that's also kind of, like upping their cortisol and getting them to be compromised. They're
yeah,
immunocompromised just, via fear.
yeah, for sure.
And that's not good. That's not good.
It's a weird time we live in right now.
It is, but you're doing something real special right now. I noticed you're doing live streams with your yoga, and that's a great thing for people to be doing. It's a cool practice to be doing from home.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying. So in my last year of my doctorate at ASU right now, and I finished my dissertation. I have to defend it in about a month, but I would have loved all this free time about 2 months ago. But I did finish it, and the way I spend my days and my time is by teaching yoga. I teach at a studio here in town, and I teach about 13 classes a week. On top of that, I've got gigs and private lessons, and I go into public schools as a guest teacher pretty frequently. So with the pandemic, all of that has totally gone away, like
Mm.
absolutely gone away. My schedule, like this interview is the first thing on my calendar in like 10 days. And so kind of brainstorming and acting really quickly because I wanted to be there for people who were going through this stress. I asked myself, how can I serve? How can I help? Like, what can I do? I'm also somebody who thrives with a schedule. And so not having that is really challenging. So I initially was like, well, what if I practice? I make myself do yoga every single day at 8 a.m.
Mm.
And doing that is a lot harder than you might think. Oh my goodness. Something just started playing on my TV. I apologize.
That's okay.
Watching a documentary about Rick Rubin. Anyway, um, so I asked myself, what can I do? And it's a lot harder to do home practice and to get out of bed for something that nobody else is depending on you for.
Right.
And so I challenged myself to live stream. And initially it was just going to be last week, Monday through Friday. And I had something different every day. So like one day was meditation, one day was breath work or pranayama, one day was movement. And so kind of going through those, and I had such an amazing response and so many people watching that I can't stop. I can't stop until I'm forced to, and I don't want to stop. So I've continued it through this week, and we did a good meditation today. And through that, I've been asking people for donations if they aren't financially affected, because so many artists are financially affected right now. And I know the feeling of stress and anxiety that comes along with finances in this like really trying time for a lot of people who are full-time freelancers, like myself. And so that's kind of where it all came from. And then the people that are being affected financially by this, I'm asking them to share with me their Venmo handle so that I can spread the love around. And really, while it'd be nice to relieve that stress from myself, there's really no point if I'm not sharing that and kind of spreading that with other people as well. So that's kind of my goal with the live streams right now. I never expected to be live streaming yoga classes, especially because in normal life, non-coronavirus life, I teach so much and it takes so much of my energy, and I love it, but it's a lot of energy being put out there in the world that I couldn't even fathom doing a virtual class on top of all the other classes. And now I'm like, I got nothing better to do. Let's go.
Yeah. That's you're forced to, as a lot of people are right now, to innovate and to do
Yeah.
things virtually and to kind of one thing this whole quarantine situation has done for us is that it's made us think over like how we do things and in a way catapult us forward into some digital age to where we all kind of do things in some virtual reality and teach online and all of that. I
Yeah.
it's many of us have been doing that to some capacity, but have like kind of up the ante. Every tour is like canceled, and artists are figuring out ways of performing over Skype Live for people or Zoom or
Yeah.
other platforms. And it's very interesting to see the kind of entrepreneurship happening in the music space.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've been really inspired by all of the music that I'm seeing put out there. So many artists are live streaming. My one of my favorite artists is doing like live stream DJ set dance party every single day, and just those things to kind of uplift people, I think, are so important in this time. And while it's unprecedented, this is something that nobody has ever seen or prepared for before. There's so much kind of like faith in humanity that I have that's come out of this, to really be able to see how people are using this to create, or to slow down, because I think that goes into, especially as artists, there's a lot of pressure to create right now, and
Mm-hmm.
to let yourself slow down if you've been hustling for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been pretty cool to see that part of it.
Yeah. It shakes
Hopefully
things up.
forever.
Yeah. It shakes things up for sure. This is like it's a time when you really have to rethink how you do things, and I think it could be really viewed from a positive lens, in that way, where you have an opportunity to slow down. You can create your own meditation little retreat, and just kind of unplug if you can afford to do that. Well, you're kind of stuck at home, then like,
Yeah,
so you can take inventory. You can rethink how you're running your life, and it's time. It's a time to think. It's a time to reflect, but it's also a time to innovate. Um, and so I think it's very interesting. And I've been talking about creating sustenance online for a long time, with
hmm,
people, and many of the many of my audience, many of the people I've spoken to about this, have just had like this full time jobs, and they didn't have the time and the energy when they came home to figure out how to, start to create some income online. But now there's a lot of time, and then there's and it's a great opportunity. Everyone is online, consuming, right?
yeah,
So it's just like the audience is just blown up online,
for
y-
sure.
and so this is really, it's a blessing that we have that today to use, for such a circumstance. If this had occurred, um, without the internet being available, this would have been much more difficult than it is.
Absolutely, absolutely, and hopefully part of the inspiration that people are gathering from this time, thinking optimistically here, once we've made it through um, everything, hopefully all of that inspiration carries its way back into the normalcy of life, and can people are able to continue to create and continue to feel inspired, and maybe also not take advantage of the things we do have when life is normal too. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
lots to gain.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, this is a great time for, really building that up, and just, um, to set that foundation up.
For sure.
And so, like, it's really cool what you're doing. It's very generous, with the streaming, and the whole Venmo thing, as you were describing. It's just that's very cool. That's very cool.
Thank you.
Um, in fact, I did some of your,
Oh
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, little pranayama thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yeah, and that's awesome, and it brings hope to people. I feel like, we forget our place in life as artists sometimes. We get lost in the practice of things, and worrying about this and that. But then when we put our energy out there and people thank us, that for a moment they can get taken away from the stress of this whole situation, and we can transport them to another place. It's, I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I am on operating on Phoenix time, but for me, it's been such a game changer to have a reason, without sounding too dark, because I really love my life, but like a reason to wake up, something to look forward to. I have to set my alarm. I have to have coffee by a certain time. It just provides that structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my East Coast friends, it's a little bit later, and you're probably already awake by, I don't know, 11 a.m. your time. But my friends on the West Coast, like, I've had a couple people say, like, thank you for, I'll roll out of bed and do meditation with you. I'll do pranayama with you, and it's the first thing I do. And to start your day like that, I think can be a pretty big game changer, and it has been for me.
Oh yeah. So a lot of people, they, just to kind of like, put a last riff on this kind of, topic here. A lot of people are not intrinsically motivated and rely on work and on the schedule that's imposed on them in order to function, right? And now they're given all this free time and space, and they're pressed to put themselves under a routine and come up with their own thing and to just, act like entrepreneurs do and be their own boss.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good thing for a lot of people. Yeah, and it might start with them kind of being lazy and then just realizing, you know what, I should get some stuff done, and then they start to pick up the habits that can actually maybe break them out of the 9 to 5 eventually.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's golden. That's golden. So you play the trumpet.
I do.
So and when reading up on you, it was interesting, the way you kind of you play the trumpet, and like what came first? Was it like I'm sure it was a trumpet before yoga, right?
Yeah, though honestly, I mean, not too in the scheme of life, not too far apart from each
Mm-hmm.
other. My dad played the trumpet
Mm-hmm.
and went to school for music initially. He's in academia, but in the arts, but does not play the trumpet at all. But when I was a really small kid, he played in, and I've learned these are things that are unique to upstate New York, but he played in fireman's band. And so he would do parades and I would come see him. And there was one time where one of his friends that also played the trumpet gave me the mouthpiece. And like as a, I think 3 or 4 year old, I could buzz. And his friend was like, if you don't give her lessons, I'm going to. And so my dad was my first trumpet teacher. I started actually, playing and trying to play the trumpet around third grade. It started in school at fourth grade. He was a fabulous trumpet teacher, but a better dad. So,
Mm.
so I ended up switching and getting private lessons, and I studied with the same guy for like 20 years, or not 20 years, 15 years maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, a long time, and he's incredible. And so I started pretty darn young. I have a very musical family, and I'm really fortunate for that. And then it's my mom who introduced me to yoga. So in middle school, she kind of saw that I maybe was a little restless. I had a lot of anxious energy, and there also was with divorced parents. My parents did a really good job of doing what they can in their power to spend alone time with me and my siblings. And so it became kind of a mom and me ritual every week to go to yoga.
Mm.
Um, and I hated it at first. I didn't hate it at first, but I didn't feel the way I feel about it now. That's for sure. It was just kind of like, this is what I'm doing because I want to hang out with my mom. I didn't totally see the benefits. She would meditate a lot too. And I remember being a teenager and being like, why would you go and sit and stare at a wall? Like, why? And I totally didn't get it until I went to college. And then I started my own yoga practice, and my journey has been kind of long and winding. But I went to college for music, so I carried obviously trumpet with me throughout my life, and yoga was kind of in and out until I was really kind of a junior, sophomore in college.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
they've both been daily things for me ever since.
Yeah, yeah. And like how has your yoga practice impacted your trumpet playing?
Oh gosh, so much, so much. So I, like I said, I went to college for music, and did what so many people did, which is went from playing, 45 minutes in high school band and then maybe an hour of practicing every single day and like checked it off my list for the day, and to going to college and play, I was placed in wind ensemble, brass ensemble, brass quintet, private lessons, all those things, to playing like 5 hours, 6 hours a day. And I wasn't an athlete by any means in my entire life, at pretty much ever. And so I pathetically enough, didn't have the muscle strength build up in my upper body to actually hold the trumpet for that period of time without
Mm-hmm.
injuring myself. So
Mm.
my it wasn't necessarily my posture, though that does play a big role. It was just the overuse of underdeveloped muscles,
Mm-hmm.
and I got injured, as so many musicians do, and developed tendonitis in my shoulders and tennis elbow, lateral epicondylitis. And so um, started going to a physical therapist, and she is who was like, go back to yoga, you used to do yoga, go back to yoga. And I was like, okay. And I went, and it strengthened me. It opened me up to all sorts of things. I didn't realize just how much anxiety I was carrying with me, not just daily, but also whenever I stepped on stage to perform. And it totally shifted that. It shifted the way I held my body. It shifted the way I played my instrument. And I honestly probably was spending less time on my instrument because I was dedicating that time to my body. And I got to be a better player through that. So
Mm.
that really, really just changed things for me. And I knew by the time I was a senior, I knew I want to go. I want to teach yoga for musicians. I think this is such an important thing. I have seen so many benefits from it. It totally changed my life, and made it so that I didn't have to quit or didn't want to quit. And that's a really big thing. I think a lot of the time when musicians are faced with an injury, they go see doctors, and not every doctor, but I've heard way too many stories of doctors telling them, okay, we'll stop playing. And that is probably the most heartbreaking thing you could say to a musician.
Oh yeah, yoga
It's
saved your
not,
music career.
yeah. Yeah, it's just not an option. And I won't get too like statisticy, but the majority of musicians have been injured, and a large amount quit because of it. And
Mm.
um, I want that to be less and less because I overcame it. I know other people have overcame it, and yoga was a really powerful tool for me
Mm-hmm.
in that. So when moving forward to my graduate degrees, I did my master's at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and kind of thought, what better of a place to get a yoga teaching certification than Boulder, Colorado. So that was like the first thing I did. I showed up and did my orientation, took a yoga class at a studio, fell in love with it, and said, I'm doing teacher training. Like, let's go.
Mm.
So, and that school has a really amazing musicians wellness program as well. So,
Nice.
yeah, it has totally impacted everything I've done ever since.
I'm very happy of this growing space that we're in, of musicians' wellness, and of because it's a very important space. Like this is the one of the least talked about things in the music world.
Yeah.
Just the wellness, mental, physical, health for musicians, and my whole mission here is to expand that and have these conversations, and like you're the second yoga for musicians teacher on this show.
Yeah.
Not many shows have these kinds of guests, right? So I try to kind of include that, and get a variety of voices on these topics, because yeah, people need to hear this. People do quit music because of these injuries, and I encounter it all the time. I teach guitar, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in over the years, I've encountered many people with injuries, and I have personal training background as well. And I've helped people correct certain postures and stuff like that to and strengthen their certain muscles in order to extend their careers, with the
Yeah.
instrument. So it's very important. And there are other elements as well, as far as like the mental and all of that. And what I like about yoga is a very all encompassing practice for human health. And of course, if it's good for human health, it's good for musician health.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, and there's so many different types of yoga too.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel fortunate to teach lots of different avenues of yoga. Restorative and Yin Yoga serves such a purpose for us. It through kind of connective tissue, but also the meditative aspect of things. And then I also teach Vinyasa yoga, which is like getting your heart rate up, and it's a little bit more of a workout, and but it's a moving meditation still. And so I also teach a format called Yoga Sculpt, which is very much so a workout, and it's kind of like a high intensity class with based off of yoga. And so there's just all sorts of formats that really serve in different ways. And
Sure.
I run. I almost said I like to run, but I don't know if that's true. I run every now and then. And there's, it serves its own purpose, and I love it, and it's its own form of moving meditation, but there are only so many different ways I can run. If I'm not going to find meditation through stillness and running. I'll find meditation through movement and running. And I think the cool thing about yoga is that it has come from so many different lineages, and it's also moved towards so many different lineages. And every single one of them serves a purpose in
Yeah.
my mind.
Let me ask you this. So, like you do, a number of these different kinds of yoga practices you teach. Um, let's say just someone's kind of easing into it, and a musician who has pains here and there, maybe
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily injured in any way, but or not even knowing of his injuries, or like what would you recommend a good starting point?
So this is the my initial answer is not going to help a lot of people, but my initial answer is um, the one that you'll keep doing.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and that's going to be different for every single person. There are a lot of musicians that need to slow down. We work so freaking hard, and our schedules are still, I still fall in the habit that I had years ago in my undergrad degree, where I like see a little sliver of free time in my calendar, and I'm like, oh, I can do this there, and I'm totally booked up 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that's not a healthy way to live,
Hmm.
right? So um, forcing you to slow down and doing that, when you're easing into it, that might be harder. That might be too hard, honestly. And so it might be better for you to start with something that's a little bit more fast paced, like a power yoga, vinyasa yoga class. So it really, really just to me depends. I think that hatha yoga is a really great tool. It moves a little bit slower than vinyasa might,
Hmm.
but it's still powerful movements and strengthening and connection to breath. And I think that those are really the most important tools. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of answers in everything I just said, but hopefully that's
Sure.
helpful for anybody
Yeah.
out there who wants to start yoga. Know that if you take one class, that's not all yoga.
Mm.
My One of my closest friends from college, I remember she took a yoga class for me, were with me, and she was just like, yoga is just not for me. And I always remember that, and I hear that a lot, like, oh, I just don't like yoga, it's just not for me. And it's like, well, maybe you just haven't found the yoga that is for you, because there are so many different formats.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think that it can really be, you can make it for you. It's much more about what the practice has to offer instead of what the actual practice is, if that
Right.
makes
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I have a I do some like powerlifting and bodybuilding kind
sense.
of stuff. And so for me, I'm already engaged in some very high intensity and tension causing things, right? And
Yeah.
I tend toward like restorative and like these
Mhm.
slow, very stretchy, because I don't stretch enough, right? And so having some practice that forces me to kind of sit in these stretches for a long time is a lot better. I find a lot more useful for me than doing something like vinyasa, which is great, but I already have all this kind of tension built up. I'd love to just kind of like sleep in every pose.
Right. Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
And then for other people, it's if they don't have any kind of like practice like I have, where um, I already have strength practices, then for them it'd be great to have some of those incorporated and do something a little bit more intense.
Yeah. And I was called to Vinyasa like very early because I loved that strengthening aspect of it. I was, for the first time in my life, like working out in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
and that really, really, really helped me. And now I'm in a place where I need yin and restorative more than ever, just to slow down and tap into the mental practice, because I feel very comfortable in the physical practice. And so
Mm-hmm.
getting a little more comfortable being still is super important for me.
Let's kind of try to like bullet point the basics of these separate practices for those
Yeah.
of us who don't know. Like, what is Yin Yoga?
So yin yoga is a very still practice. The way I describe it is that everything's on your butt or your back pretty much.
Mm.
And you hold postures for 3 to 5 minutes.
Oh, I love
And
that.
yeah, and it's not as alignment based as a lot of other yoga practices. It's sensation based. So the goal of yin yoga is to not activate a single muscle and really like allow gravity to do its job. And what that does is if you set yourself up correctly with sensation but not pain, you get deeper than your larger muscles. You get into your connective tissue, so your fascia, which I like to describe like the white webbing on an orange.
Mm-hmm.
So, so it's kind of like what holds everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a lot of studies that kind of prove that we also hold. So getting into that fascia will promote a little more flexibility, and
Mm-hmm.
that the larger muscles can't provide you. And then on top of that, I've seen studies that show that we often hold emotions and trauma actually in our fascia. So we hold on to that stored energy. And so it can become a somewhat emotional practice as well, and have that emotional release through it. Um, Hatha yoga is pretty much anything that is kind of connecting breath and postures and movement. So it's a pretty broad scale term. A lot of the time, hatha teachers teach at a slower pace. Really, I think it's a great starting point for a lot of beginners. Vinyasa or power yoga are one and the same, and it's much more fast paced usually. Like breath to movement, if you're breathing pretty darn fast, depending on the teacher, and pretty large sweeping movements, almost like I kind of consider it to be in a way like a dance, and you'll get into your larger muscles, and it's a balance of strengthening and lengthening, so not just one or the other. Did I
Mm-hmm.
say any more? I'm like, I'll keep going through my like Rolodex of
Yeah. Well, yeah.
lineages.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. I mean, like, yeah, like I've mentioned, like when after having so much strength work and then going into vinyasa yoga, I actually found myself frustrated because like I'm like I came here to like just stretch out, and here I
Yeah.
am just like swimming through these different forms, you know. And I mean I burn a lot of calories, but like I basically get cardio out of it instead of stretching.
Right. And it does have that added element, which is great for those that don't want to find cardio elsewhere.
Sure.
But yeah, it is. It's fun. Also, I feel bad as sometimes teaching in the studio setting, and it's like clear that somebody had no idea what they were getting themselves into for whatever class they showed up for. And
Oh
sometimes it's the other way around. Like sometimes it's like, I heard yoga was really hard, and then they come to a yin class and they're on their butt the whole time. And so it's your first yoga class is never going to be your favorite yoga class, I think, and that's something to keep in mind for those of you that are interested in starting a yoga practice. And it takes some time to find the teachers that work for you, the formats that work for you. I really like vinyasa yoga. I wouldn't take it from every single teacher,
yeah. Hmm.
so it just kind of depends.
And that's yoga. A lot of people see it from one dimension, or whatever their first experience was, or their assumption of it, or someone else's experience and them hearing of it. They just kind of characterize it in a very particular way, when, as you're explaining, it could be so many different things. It could be
Yeah.
cardio, it could be stretching, it could be strength work, right? And so there, like you said, there's a different yoga for different situations, different people, or different circumstances. And just to realize that what I like about yoga is that it could be all those things, and I always look for just the one thing that someone can do that sort of covers the whole area. and
Yeah.
and yoga could be everything,
Yeah.
and it could be something that you can do into old age, and that
Yeah.
can keep you flexible. It's just it's a beautiful thing, and it has a super long lineage.
Yeah.
It's one of our oldest practices that humans have for fitness, and it's a great thing. And you can do it anywhere. You don't need weights. You don't need anything. All you just get on the floor and you just start moving.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So that's fascinating. I've seen like some interesting ones like chair yoga. I've seen like people on these
There's
aerial things.
Yeah, there's every type of yoga ever. Beer yoga, a goat yoga, dog yoga, and it is interesting. It's a commonly talked about topic in the yoga community as to if that is actually yoga, or
Mm,
if that's honoring the practice of the ancient teachers, the beginning of yoga, or if it's kind of dissing it in a way.
mm,
And my 2 cents on that are that yoga didn't even start as a physical practice in the first place. There was no talk of physical movement, asana, which we translate as postures nowadays. Asana was only referred to as sitting for meditation. So the physical sitting posture, like kind of what I'm doing right now on my couch. But that wasn't even in the beginning texts of yoga. Um, and then so we've adopted and adapted it for the modern years and the current culture. And like, while I'm not out there practicing goat yoga every single day or beer yoga every single day, my process is that if it means more people are doing yoga, let's do it.
right.
Let's go for it. Like rage yoga, let's go. If that means you need to get that out and like that's your yoga, laughing yoga, I think there's so many different things, and
Sure.
they're not all for me, that's for sure. But if they're for somebody and that's one more person doing yoga,
Mm.
then that's important.
Have you ever seen like a yoga practice that you were just like, no, no, like that? It was literally like maybe just something that didn't fulfill the criteria of what yoga is, or it wouldn't be that helpful, or would even detract, like, or all of them kind of served some kind of purpose. Like,
That's a good question.
Mhm.
So I think my answer today is very different than it would be 5 or 6 years ago. I said that I teach yoga Sculpt, which is yoga with weights, and it's a high intensity workout.
With weights? Mm.
And yeah, and a heated room. Um, and it's a lot on your body. And the first class I took, I came from a little bit more of a spiritual background of yoga. I've spent some time in India. I did a lot of trainings in Boulder that were much more on the spiritual side. And I moved to Phoenix and I took a yoga sculpt class, and I walked out pissed. Like I walked out like, I can't believe they're calling that yoga. What the hell is going on here? This is not yoga. And I was mad. But I was also poor. And so I did the training. um, and the studio I worked for was offering I had auditioned in with my Vinyasa and my power yoga um, uh, skills already. And they said, you can do an intensive for free with in yoga sculpt. And if you test in to teach it, then you would be teaching it. You could get some on the schedule, you could sub. And I'm like, well, I do need that extra money, so I am going to do that. And so I decided to do it. And the more I learned about it and the more I did it, the more I was like, you know what? This is yoga. We might not be oming at the end. We might not be half the teachers don't know Sanskrit, like that's okay. It's still moving and connecting breath to movement.
Mm-hmm.
And it strengthened my vinyasa practice so significantly. There were
Mm-hmm.
muscles I didn't even know I had. And I've
Mm.
moved from, that way of thinking to right now I'm studying to take the NASM test to become a personal trainer. So I never thought I would even do either of those things. And so even though I might have a gut reaction to like, that's not yoga, no way in hell, I almost always shift in some way and remind myself that really everything is yoga.
Right. It's very interesting. I mean, like even just like what you mentioned, like yoga perhaps didn't even start with any physical motion. It was basically meditation that morphed into a physical practice.
Yeah,
And if it can morph there, why can't it just adapt with the times and to how people need it?
exactly.
And so yeah, in that way, I guess it could, and like yoga with weights. Wow, that's it's
It's fun.
interesting.
It's fun. It's
Mhm.
a lot of our teachers call it kind of like the gateway drug to yoga because it gets the gym rats into the
Mm.
studio and the amount of I've had professional football players in my classes like coming in with their girlfriends thinking that it's like, oh, yoga, and afterwards they're like, you kicked my ass, and it's like, yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah, no, yoga's hard enough. Like, gosh, with weights,
Yeah,
that can be, like, yeah, that
yeah.
can that could be really intense.
And it's
So,
good. It's good
mhm,
for the people like me who I'm not going to go lift at the gym.
mhm.
I have a gym membership and I'm like on the cardio machines all day, but I am not going to go lift at the gym. It's intimidating to me. And so it gives me that setting to still get that strengthening in.
Yeah, I think it's important that people find the thing that they will do, like you said, like the yoga practice that you're going to do, that
Yeah.
you would do, and then that's what's important. We can theorize about what's the most, the best one or whatever, and but at the end of the day, it's like people need to get their physical activity in. We're no longer plowing fields and all the practices that we would have done 100 years ago. Now we're just sitting behind computers, especially now with this Corona thing.
Yeah.
Um, that people need to be physically moving around, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, whatever gets them to do that, whether it is yoga or something else, it's a very important thing to move around and what do you think? Well, aside from physical yoga, like what does your like dietary practice look like?
My dietary practice is another kind of long and winding road in my life. I so I as I mentioned, I was raised by divorced parents, happily and beautifully divorced parents, and remarried, and they are all incredible humans. And my dad's house was pretty standard, like meat eating, whatever, lots of great food. And then my mom was vegan pretty much my entire life. My entire life still is.
Wow.
And so I went back and forth between the two. And when I turned like 5 or 6, I think, as a very small child, I decided I was going to be a vegetarian and just stop eating meat altogether. I met a pig, and someone told me that's where bacon comes from, and I was like, I'm done. I'm also a
Mm.
middle of 4 kids, and I've got 3 brothers, and so they all, when they are saying you can't do it, I'm very stubborn, and I kept with it for quite some time, and still stand by that decision as a probably the best decision I made as a 5 or 6 year old. Um, it has morphed a little bit just due to some health things, some travelings. There are sometimes, I spent a little bit of time in Japan, and I
Mm.
had to learn to eat fish, and I had never eaten fish and never liked fish, but it was eat fish just rice basically when I was there.
Mm.
So I ventured into seafood and pescatarian life. I have dabbled in veganism, um, and where I'm at now is a complicated place. um, I will eat most things. I do not eat red meat. I've pretty much never eaten red meat in my entire life. However, when it comes to like chicken or a turkey and like lighter meats, I don't know how to make it for myself. I've never made it for myself, but
Mm.
I do have a philosophy that it comes down to the intention behind it. So
Mm.
I got really tired of people making something extra or something different for me, or we need to go to a different restaurant just because of my restrictions. And that I don't like to be that person. I don't like
Mm.
to, I don't, if I were the person doing something different for somebody else, it wouldn't feel like a burden, but being the burden, it feels like a burden, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I hear that.
Um,
I
and
maybe your compassion is super high from all the yoga practice and
yeah,
meditation.
maybe, yeah, yeah. And so at this point, as long as I don't think it's going to totally upset my stomach, I will, if it's made with love from somebody I love, I will try pretty much everything.
Hmm.
That's important to me when it comes down to my own eating and what I make for myself. I cook almost entirely vegetarian. I will order almost entirely vegetarian. But I won't turn down something that was made with really good intentions behind it. And I don't say, I'm vegetarian, because that does come with this like feeling of needing to do something different.
Mm.
Or at least that was my experience of it. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's my long and winding road. I'm currently I do. I mentioned my mom is vegan. She's
Hmm.
also a yogi, and her and I will do these like yoga cleanses every now and then, which is really just focusing on getting rid of sugar, meat, caffeine, which I don't do because I really need coffee, and eating like whole foods, and yeah.
This is a really cool
So,
coffee though. It's not just coffee. It's that mud water. You know,
oh, I've heard of that. What?
yeah, yeah. My roommate basically got on
Oh,
it. Oh gosh, it's like a whole bunch of cool things. I posted about it recently. It's there's a lot of mushrooms. There's
oh,
like
okay.
reishi and lion's mane, chaga, and it's black tea, cardamom, and has gosh, it has a whole bunch of different things, black pepper or whatever. Like it's just and then today I added some coffee just because I
Yeah.
really wanted to be like
A little.
sharp. But honestly, even
Yeah.
without all that, like it's really potent. Like I just feel like I meditated for an hour after I drink it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really good. It's really
Yeah.
good.
I've had a few
Mm-hmm.
different like concoctions and stuff, and that come
Mm-hmm.
from kind of like that yoga cleanse and just focusing on eating whole foods. So that's where I'm at right now. We're in the middle of a cleanse right now, actually, but with a
Mm.
little bit less focus, since with all of the panic going on, not every food is available. So just making do with what I
Mm.
can.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Diet is a very. I like that you've sort of been around the block dietarily and you've tried a lot of different things. And that um, you're a non-dogmatic eater. Right. And that's what I tell people. It's like they ask me. It's like, oh, are you vegetarian? This that. I'm like, I'm not dogmatic about it. Right. It's like if
Mm-hmm.
I feel my body needs a nutrient, I eat it. Um,
Yeah.
and you alluded to something very important, right? You can have one food, and that same exact food from a different source, could be bad for you, and from another source, it could be great for you, right? And there is something really, and I don't want to get too woo woo here, but this is a yoga episode, right? So,
Yeah. Let's go.
but intention and like love shapes the food that we eat.
Yeah.
I really believe that we do have the ability to modulate how a food affects us by that intention, right? Oh, your cat has, is that your dog
My
with a
God,
cone?
she's in a cone
Oh,
right now, so
oh,
she has some issues moving around, but she's keeping me
yeah.
company.
My cat's roaming around over here. Um, oh, it's great having a pet in the house.
Yeah.
That's it's just such love, that's just unconditional love, right? And
Yeah, seriously.
so that speaking of that love, right? When it's been shown that we have the effect to, well, we can affect the molecular structure of things, especially food, and that intention, and so this is like thanking for your food before you eat it and things like that. That it really has an effect.
Yeah.
And so this lady I live with here, Susan, she's just an amazing chef. Um, and when she cooks, and I'll be eating something that I don't normally eat, like a scone or things like that, but like she'll
Mhm.
just put so much love into it, and like, I feel like it doesn't give me any kind of issues.
Yeah.
Whereas if I kind of pull that out of some kind of package, or from a place of people who make these things reluctantly, it's like not even the same food.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think on the consumption side of it too, something that is so important that took me a really long time to learn, and I still work on it, is the lack of guilt for it.
Oh yeah.
So that's, knowing that love and compassion were put into it, that's kind of what will like relieve me
Hmm.
from feeling guilty about something that like maybe I shouldn't be eating cake right now, or a chocolate croissant, which is like one of my favorite things. If if I let myself have that and not feel guilty about it, then my body is going to react better to it as well, and that emotional guilt really does translate to physical feelings. And so knowing that it's okay, you don't have to have the perfect diet, you don't have to be it's just much more important to listen to your emotions and your body, and then eat from that space.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, that's super important. And for those of people who are listening that are starting to, the science-minded people that we might be losing in this conversation, I want to bring it back to the fact that if you look at the placebo effect, it's responsible for over 55% of the effectiveness of a medication. And that is to say that like our expectation, there's a really great book, The Biology of Belief, that
Okay.
shows how we literally modulate our cellular activity based on what we think about it, right?
That's cool.
It's very cool, and it's very important to like you said, eat without guilt, and just to actually, love things as they come into our bodies, and just imagine it nourishing us and all that, because um, we will substantially change how our bodies respond to food, right? You ever get really stressed out, and you're just stressed about something, and when you eat out of that stress, you actually like you start getting stomach aches and all of that, right?
Mhm.
It's and it could be healthy food, but our bodies just don't process it well because of the state
Yeah.
that we're in. The other thing I've heard, which is crazy, if you stress eat, you're more likely to gain weight, because especially in the abdominal area,
Hmm.
we have a lot of cortisol receptors around our lower abdomen, right, where a lot of people put on weight,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is stress weight, because like what happens is that those cortisol receptors are there, and when we're stressed out, those are active, and it's literally just going to store fat
Yeah.
in that area if we're eating while we're stressed. So
Yeah.
it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. Food is it's a tough one. And as a I I don't weigh in ever on how anybody else eats, because I think it's so important that people are eating the way that they feel. And there's so much validity in being a nutritionalist and paying attention to those things. But I, for one, am not qualified to do that. And all I can speak from is my experience and my relationship with food.
Hmm. Yeah, no, totally, totally. It's one of those things. It's very personal, and like you, I've sort of experimented with different ways of eating,
Hmm.
All across the spectrum. I've eaten like vegan, and I've pretty much almost went carnivore, just like everything in between.
Yeah.
Um, I do look at it from a kind of getting the nutrients I need point of view.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's like whatever philosophy I have, if I'm over, a friend's house and their mother just makes this amazing dish, just I'll eat it, right? It's just regardless of what I'm not even gonna question it that much. Even if I'm like so strict, I'm like I only eat organic meat, da 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 da, right? It's like are you really gonna do that? You're going to turn down like you're doing more damage than good in some circumstances like that.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Like whatever rules we hold for ourselves, we should hold to them 90-95% of the time. But if there's that of course there are exceptions to that, like if it's something that's like an addiction thing, it's just you know
Right.
um there's this 100% idea that makes sense in some circumstances, or complete exclusion of some things if you're susceptible to you know if like substances and stuff like that. Do you
Yeah.
drink at all?
Yeah. I do drink. I do. I try not to drink in excess,
Mm-hmm.
but I do. I find that so much of life is about balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a very social person. I like to go out. I like to be with my friends, and not that you can't do those things and not drink,
Mm-hmm.
but um, I know that I have control over that, and that's kind of the biggest thing. And like I really like the taste of beer. It's like food. It's its own art form. I think that a lot of alcohol is um its own, the experience of tasting
Mm.
is really important. Not that drinking alcohol is important, but if you like the taste, and you allow yourself to experience that, then that can be a fun thing and a cool
Mm-hmm.
thing, and just a way to balance out in life.
What kind of beer?
Oh gosh, it has changed over the years because now I live in like the hottest state in the world, seventh layer of hell over here. But I used to, I used to drink darker beers. I used to really like porters, and IPAs, and now I'm much more like towards the wheat beers,
Mm.
and kind of like hefeweizens and those things, just because it is too darn hot to be drinking dark stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's too heavy.
It needs to feel kind of cooling, and yeah, not like you just ate an entire loaf of bread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, I hear that. No, and it's funny because like I come from a Russian background, right? And
Uh-huh.
a lot of people in my family or some friends, and they're drinking like vodka and all of that, and that's never really sat well with me.
Uh-huh.
That I never really got into that too much, and but I once in a blue moon, but like I'd rather have like I actually like apple cider, right?
Oh, I do too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like Ace pineapple cider is really
Oh,
good.
I never had pineapple cider. That
Oh,
sounds
it's very
great.
good. Yeah.
Oh, I've had
Yeah.
mead.
Oh, yeah. Meat is good. Yeah, it's one of those things that I'm fortunate enough that whatever brain chemistry I was blessed with, I can handle balance, and I feel lucky about that. So it is really just about balance for me, and I recognize that that's not how everybody can live or wants to live, but I definitely am fortunate that I can find that balance in my life, and I work really freaking hard, so I play pretty hard too.
Well, that's good. I mean, yeah, exactly. You have to balance. You have to balance, and because otherwise, if you hold yourself back too much and you're too strict about those kinds of things, when you do let go, it's out of like this repressed, weird energy, and then you
Yeah,
can go too far.
yeah,
y- You
yeah,
know, and
absolutely.
and so just like little bits of like it's like yin and yang, right?
Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah, and if we would venture further down that little rabbit hole, how about where do you stand on weed?
Oh, on weed. I think I personally, I live in a state, I think it's important to say that I do live in a state where it is medically available.
Okay.
And I do think that it serves a really important medical purpose for a lot of people. I've seen so many people manage anxiety and through it. And I do feel that way. I've got CBD. I use CBD with my dog to calm her anxiety. So I do believe that it serves a purpose, and just like anything and everything else, it can be overused
Oh
and it
yeah.
can be abused. But if used intelligently, it can really enhance someone's experience of life.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean like with the I mean, do you ever use it recreationally?
so I have,
Yeah.
yes. I'm like applying for jobs soon, so I'm careful, but
Oh yeah. No, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's one of
but
those
medically, yes.
it makes sense and well, you know what? It's one of those things that like we're just I guess maybe months or a year or two before like I think that it goes federal
Yeah,
and it's just you know
absolutely.
decriminalized because it's stupid to have it like under Schedule 1.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough. I moved to Boulder, Colorado, the year that it became recreational there, and just the benefits I saw um, through those tax dollars and through
Mhm.
and just the shift kind of in environment um, that I saw through that was pretty cool to watch and to experience. And I think that the rest of the country is hopefully going in the same route pretty soon. So.
Mhm. Yeah. So I noticed the thing find your center. It's like a theme that you have going. What's that about?
So that was actually kind of like the name of one of my close friends from Colorado came up with that because brass players use the term all the time, like playing in the center of the note. So you're playing in the center of your note, and that's where everything is really open and resonant, and you're playing right where that note has to be on your horn. So that's a term that brass players use quite a bit.
Hmm.
And it's also a term that yoga teachers use quite a bit, like tapping into your center, your foundations, your core, the core of your being. And so when I initially started my website and YouTube, I was doing yoga for brass players. And then I realized that it was really silly to kind of close myself off to every other musician.
Hmm.
But I started that way because I was comfortable with brass players. And that was
Yeah.
like that's what I knew. I was too nervous to venture down any other realm. Throughout the years, I've presented at a lot of universities, worked with a lot of different musicians, vocalists, conductors, percussionists, entire bands, pretty much every end of the spectrum. And so I've opened it up to yoga for any and every musician, and have developed some knowledge to cater to everybody. But yeah, when I first started, it was just for brass players, and so I called it Finding Your Center, because you're looking for the center, and you're trying to tap into the center of you. So
I think it's like finding a flow,
yeah,
you know, as it could be just if it's to be kind of stretched out to everything, you
yeah,
know, and that's a common topic, you know, just practicing from a place of flow.
absolutely, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's and I like I like the way that you approach your marketing, right, on your Instagram and stuff, and just the colors and like the just I like what you're doing. Like what's your where do you want to take things? Like what's your vision as far as you know where
Yeah.
you want to take stuff?
Yeah, well, first, thank you. It has taken me a while to kind of figure out how to make a brand. And
Mm-hmm.
and that Instagram actually started years and years and years ago, and it got hacked, and it was a bunch of Ray-Ban ads for a long time.
Oh man.
Um, and then I all around the same time, I met Amelia, who you've had on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I got laid off from my full-time job. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to restart. I was still doing my own thing kind of separately and going to universities and presenting, but I didn't have an online presence in what I was doing at all. And so I got my fire kind of relit and restarted the Instagram, and it has definitely been a journey, but I'm pretty happy with where it's at right now. And I hope to keep doing that. Like I said, I'm in my final year of my doctorate, so assuming life is not canceled, I will be graduating in May.
Right.
And my dissertation topic is yoga for musicians. And
Mm-hmm.
that being said, I am still very passionate about playing the trumpet and teaching the trumpet. And my goal is to teach trumpet at a university that will also allow me to either create or run or be a part of a musician's wellness program and start that. And I do really believe that more and more schools are open to that. It's a hard thing to just apply for. There are no job openings on we need a musician's wellness person or a yoga for musicians teacher, but more and more schools are becoming really open to it. I guest teach at Colburn Conservatory the past 2 or 3 semesters. I've been doing that. And so just seeing music schools open to that, that's kind of my hope, is to be able to still continue to teach trumpet, play some trumpet, and run a wellness program for whatever school I'm at.
Yeah, and this whole wellness for musicians, like we've mentioned, it's just like it's a brand new space,
Yeah.
and we're all sort of creating this path together, and it's beautiful, and I think it should serve to maybe inspire other people who are doing something else that's might be spoken about less, but is equally as important in getting, well, whether it's for musicians or not, for their particular field, to be addressing something that hasn't been spoken about, but needs attention, and to be able to create your own job,
Yeah.
and to be able to create your own path here, and to have, to be bold enough to do that. And I commend you and the other people in the space that are brave enough to take this path, that's just fresh, and that doesn't have as much people, like as much support. It's not like something like
Yeah.
as recognized. So
Yeah.
mhm.
And kind of a loftier, really big goal for me too is to create. So part of what I do at my current yoga studio is lead yoga teacher trainings. I've led about 7 yoga teacher trainings,
Mhm.
and I I have this like goal. I've got a doc on my computer that's like fairly filled up, but it's just kind of there for me to keep brainstorming. Is I would love to cultivate and create a yoga teacher training
Mm.
for musicians and for music teachers, and finding the ways to implement it into their own teaching, whether it's in the classroom or private teaching and their own playing. And so to provide that, so that then now we have all of these people that can teach yoga, and not just teach yoga, but teach yoga for musicians, because it is a totally different approach than what I got my 200-hour certification in. And so being able to do that and hopefully like grow this field eventually.
Yeah.
That's a 10-year plan sort of sort
Sure.
of goal, but yeah,
Well,
that's something I'd love to do.
and one thing, that what you're currently doing with these live streams, just due to the circumstances of this coronavirus quarantine, is so important. I think that because, like, if you think about it, a lot of musicians tour, right? And
Yeah.
they're not going to be going consistently to some studio, and they
Mm.
might have to just tune into a stream like yours from the tour bus or from their hotel room, and then just do their practice, and they could have a consistent teacher no matter where they are in the world. And
Yeah, and
mhm,
it is, there are really a lot of good online resources for
mhm,
yoga, but I do think that I feel the need to share that yoga for musicians is different. I will be on there and telling you how to modify for your wrists, for your shoulders, for the areas that really a lot of musicians see pain in, that the normal population doesn't necessarily deal with to the extent that we do. And not
mhm.
every yoga teacher is doing that. And that's because they're not teaching the musicians. And so there are a lot of really awesome online resources, but I do find that it's really important to provide that service for musicians, because I don't want you holding a plank if you've got tendonitis in your wrists. Like I
Mm.
want to be able to offer those options and deal with the asymmetries that so many musicians face based off of what instrument they play,
Mm.
and kind of provide modifications and options based off of that, instead of just like based off of the general my view of the human body.
Awesome. Yeah, I love what you're doing. So if you had one thing you can share with all musicians, what would that be?
Ooh, um, that's a great question. And I think it would be to do something different. So, branch out musically and with what your hobbies are. I come from the classical music world where so many people are spending hours and hours and hours on end in the practice room. And you might regret that when it comes time where you have to do a podcast interview, or you have to do, where you have to have social interactions, or your body starts to break down in one way or another. And like, uh, don't let your instrument be your 100% identity. Yes, music is your life. Yes, it's a passion. Yes, you have to dedicate everything to it, but identify as other things too, because you are a person that is capable of so much more than the instrument that you own or play. And so that's kind of my my message is, let yourself branch out, let yourself do different stuff, even if it doesn't feel easy or like contributing to your music. It probably is more than you think.
More relevant than ever. And that's why I speak about entrepreneurship on this show, because people, musicians, fundamentally, from a personality point of view, share a lot of elements with entrepreneurs, and they don't have to starve. They could thrive, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great message. That's a great message. Where can people find you online?
So they can find me. My website is yoga-for-musicians.com. My Facebook is just Yoga for Musicians, and my Instagram is Yoga for Musicians. No punctuation at all. Yeah, those are the main places. YouTube as well. I link pretty much everything on Facebook and Instagram to my YouTube. It's also, my website is connected to my YouTube, so that's all out there.
Yeah, easy to find. Ladies and gentlemen, Brianne Borden, it's been great having you on. And, maybe we'll share another conversation in the future and see where you're at that point.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for being on here.